Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, we have our special guest, Flavio Zanetti, who will discuss Spiritism and its message of liberation. Hi, Flavio. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Peter. How are you?
Great, doing well. Thank you. So, before Flavio shares his knowledge with us, let me introduce him more formally. Flavio Zanetti has worked for the board of directors for the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts in different positions. He acted as the program's director for the United States Spiritist Federation and more recently helped found the Spiritist Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to disseminating Spiritism in English. He also contributes as a translator of printed Spiritist materials and with simultaneous translation for Spiritist events nationwide. Professionally, he is an engineering manager working for a multinational telecommunications company. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, and a master's degree in International Management and Business Operations. Thank you for being here, Flavio.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It's a pleasure.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Remember, everyone, to please send in your questions because we will be open for questions after his talk. And now it's all yours, Flavio.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for the warm introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks that are following us from the all over the world. It's such an honor and a pleasure to spend a few minutes with these esteemed folks here that join these sessions on a weekly basis. Before we start, we'd like to really raise our thoughts, try to connect with the spirituality around us, and ask of our guardian angels, our benefactor spirits who are here with us. May they guide, may they help, may they really bless our hearts, brings our minds to peace so that we can really comprehend the message with the same care and interest from which we used to put together for you guys, right? So, as Peter mentioned, the topic that we're going to be talking this morning, Spiritism, a message of liberation. But before we really start, I think it's important first to ask the question, what is Spiritism? What is the message that he portrays to humankind? Can he really bring liberation to our lives? We argue, or folks argue, that beyond the freeing of rituals, dogmas, and ceremonies, Spiritist ideas do really help us see the world with a different set of eyes, a different perspective, not the eyes of confinement or exclusivity that we have seen throughout history and religions and whatnot, but rather a message of love, inclusion, welcoming in every aspect of the way. People today still long for liberation. We long for liberation of our dependencies, right? We long for the liberation of our shortcomings. I want to be a better person. I want to be a better this. We try to really free ourselves oftentimes from cycles of violence, from the threat of a poor harvest, from abuse, from oppression, and the list goes on and on and on. How can Spiritism free us or liberate us from these things? Spiritism in its essence comes more actual than ever to show us a compelling invitation of love, reasoning, and hope that can really serve as its main comforting message of liberation. So let's get started, folks. The first one that I like to really spend a few minutes, right, as first things first, let's define what Spiritism is. For some of those folks that may not know or may have really stumbled across this conversation or this topic, so it can really refresh our minds for those that are already aware of what Spiritism really is. the definition that I have here, a progressive body of knowledge that really deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relation with the corporeal world. That's what Spiritism is for all of us, right? It's this knowledge base of content that, yes, he was created by Allan Kardec. Kardec codified, compiled all the messages that he had received from all over the world, from South to North America, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, back in the 19th century. And he compiled all these messages to really publish what we know today as Spiritism. So Allan Kardec did not create Spiritism, but rather he compiled, thanks to those messages, or I should say mediumship messages, that he had received in order to offer humankind this new thing, right? So it's always important to define, because when we look at the very first question that Kardec deals or talks about in the Spirit's book, it's about God. But when we look at God, why is it so important to study about God? Why is it? I mean, honestly, if you look at the whole definition of the word religion, that comes from Latin, religare, or reconnect. Every religion, many philosophies and ideologies, they talk about God, a creator, a father, a mother. But today, however, what we're talking about here is the Spiritist perspective, or our view of God. And you folks are gonna see in a minute that this view really liberates us from the anthropomorphic, anthropos, right, from humankind, morphic as form, so anthropomorphic concept of God being this old man with a beard, sitting in a throne with a little cane and giving orders, right? We don't subscribe to that definition. We do not, right? We as Spiritists do not understand God as that, but rather we see God as the supreme intelligence of the universe, the first cause of all things. That's question number one from the Spirit's book. And this concept, ladies and gentlemen, or folks, my friends, my esteemed folks here, this concept that we see here is much more in line with what we learn today from science. From, for example, Einstein to Spinoza, God is much more than an old man sitting in a throne and worrying about the fate of us humans. I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists. That's what Einstein used to say. And he continued, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and activities and actions of human beings, but rather a God that's really understandable, that can comprehend the overall universe, and not really with the day-to-day activities of ourselves here. Albert Einstein said that in 1929, folks, roughly about 70 years after the publication of Spirit's book. So when we look at Spiritism per se, we saw all the teachings that Moses came and developed and published and whatnot as a version 1.0 of what we learned today from spirituality. Jesus came after that, gave us version 2.0. Spiritism gave and really enhanced our version 2.0 to perhaps a version 3.0, so that we can really comprehend the concept of God in a very different way, more welcoming, more encompassing. And that's the first liberation, folks. The concept of God removes us from that closed box of seeing God as a person, as a human being. Because as we learn from Spiritism, God's not a person. God cannot be like you and I. Of course not. God is a category in itself, right? The supreme intelligence, the utmost intelligence that exists in the universe, and the first cause of all things. That's why God is not a he or a she. Some folks may see God as a father, which is totally fine, as we learned from Jesus' prayer, right? Our Father, that's totally fine. Other folks may see God as a mother, totally fine, as a creator, as an energy, as this thing that created the universe. Yes, all these are included in that definition that we learn from Spiritism. So moving on, if we really spend a few minutes to talk about Jesus, and why is it important to talk about Jesus? Because Spiritism really draws a lot of its concepts, if not most of its concepts, from Christianity, obviously. And when we look at Jesus, it's really important for us to understand what's the Spiritist view of Jesus. For example, if you look at Jesus from a historical perspective, the most biographies ever written talk about him. If you go to Amazon, for example, and search Jesus biography, there's tens of thousands of publications that are talking about his life. Speaking of his life, it divided how we count time in our planet, correct? Before Christ and after him. Even nature responded to him when he called to stop the rain or to calm the waters. When you look at Jesus today, over 2 billion people follow Jesus' message from the world. There are many, many, many famous people in the world. We know that. Some are very well known from their own community, their city, their countries. Others are known worldwide, obviously. However, just knowing the name of someone famous doesn't really mean that we know that person. Doesn't really mean that we know that individual. That's why it's important to study Jesus' life, to try to understand what happened in the background, what kind of person he really was when he was with us. Was he somebody special? Was he somebody, extraordinary? Has God created Jesus with a different format that God created us? All these questions are very relevant from all we're talking about here because, again, as I mentioned before, people all over the world had heard something about Jesus Christ, even though he lived 2,000 plus years ago. Yet, and here's the catch here, yet many folks are still confused about who Jesus really was. Some say that he was just a man, like you and I. Others claim that he was nothing more than a prophet. Some other folks still believe that Jesus is God. He and God are the same person, or he is the same person. And he should be worshipped like God is. Should he? Those are some of the concepts that we learn from Spiritism. So, if you look at, again, the Spirit's book, question 625, that's the question, the poignant question that Allan Kardec presented to the immortal spirits. What is the most perfect standard that God has offered humankind as a model and guide? And the spirits were very clear when they answered this question. Jesus. This is the shortest answer from the Spirit's book. But why is it so important? Because we Spiritists, when we talk about Jesus, we understand that Jesus is not special. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry to break it to you folks, but you are not special either. Even though your parents, your mama may call you special when you were young. I know my mom did. She called my son, "You're so special. You're the best son in the world." Little did you know, right? So none of us are special. Jesus was not special. He's not special. I'm not special. You are not special. Nobody is special. Because as we learn from Spiritism, our Father, our Mother, God loves us the same. Every one of us is loved the exact same way. So if you were special, if I were special, that would have meant that somebody else was not going to be special, correct? Because for somebody to be special, somebody cannot be special. Otherwise, we're all the same, place. And that's what we learn from Spiritism. Nobody's special. Jesus, ourselves, we're all loved the same exact way by our Creator, by God. hang on a second, Flavio, but does that mean that I can do everything Jesus did? 100%. By the way, I'm not the one saying this. He told us that 2,000 years ago. You are gods, lowercase g, right? You are gods. You can do everything I've done and much, much more. He even told us that we could do what he did and much more. But so what's the difference then between Jesus and ourselves? I'll probably say it's a Grand Canyon of difference between where we are from where he is. So Jesus is a spirit like we all are, okay? But long, long time ago, he had made better decisions than we have, okay? So that's why he's in a position now, in a scale of location where he's way more advanced, morally, spiritually, as we also learn from the Spirit's book, than we all are. Meaning, we should really aspire to be what Jesus is right now, or to become what he is right now. That's our future. That's everybody's future to get at that destination. Flavio, hang on a second. Does that mean that everyone could be a Jesus himself? 100%. That's what we learn from Spiritism, right? And that's the second liberation concept, that Jesus is human, like you and I are, right? So it could be said that Jesus himself initiated this liberation with his very progressive message. He was revolutionary when he came here. We can all agree that his message challenged a lot of the status quo, correct? And that liberating message he had offered threatened the religious and other societal structures that were in place as we know it. Unfortunately, we didn't really understand his message back then, and it's still unknown for a lot of people today. But Flavio, how can Spiritism help me understand Jesus more? Well, first, let's comprehend him as a regular human being like you and I are, correct? And then we can look at him as the spirits, like Kardec asked the spirits as a model and guide, and we should mirror our life to be doing 100% what he was doing if he were, he were doing if he were in our shoes, or he would be doing if he were in our shoes, rather. So when we have that behavior, when we have that mindset, when we understand life or Jesus as not only a prophet, a special, anointed, right? That's the definition of the word Christ. Not that, but rather someone that had made much better decisions beforehand, and that is now working at a different level. Then we're all gonna get there. Flavio, what about the criminal those criminals that are? What about? Yes, 100%. God has created us to progress, to achieve what Jesus has achieved. It may take us, some of us, much longer than others, but all of us, without exception, are gonna get there. Right? That's the second message of liberation. But one of the messages that I think it's important for us to touch upon that really inspires a lot of what us spiritists do is this right here. And this message, by the way, is this phrase is a phrase that Kardec wrote, or the spirits wrote through messages in the Gospel according to Spiritism, that without charity there's no salvation. And folks, I want to call out by the huge message behind this, because imagine if Allan Kardec had said, without Spiritism, there's no salvation. Does that mean that only Spiritists are going to achieve salvation? That'll be very exclusive, right? Only these people here, only those people there are going to get there. And by the way, that's a lot of the messaging that we heard from Christianity throughout the years, correct? Only this religion, only that group of people, only those folks are going to achieve salvation. No, Kardec did not say that. Imagine if Kardec had said, without the church or without religion, there's no salvation. But what about that little guy or the person, Harvey or Johnny? I cannot use the word Johnny because one time I was, performing this talk and I used the word Johnny because somebody said, "Hey, I'm Johnny. Does that mean me?" So no, I'm sorry, that's not you. So that's why I started using Harvey, because it's not a very popular name. But imagine if Harvey, and if you're Harvey, I apologize. Imagine if Harvey is there and then he doesn't go to the church at all. He's not religious, right? He calls himself an atheist, but he's very loving. He helps others. He does his job as a father, as a son, as a parent, as a partner, as a husband. All these roles that Harvey plays in his life, he plays them really well. Does that mean that if Harvey doesn't call himself religious, he's not going to achieve salvation? No, that's not what we learn from Spiritism. Correct? Because charity is the vehicle. It's through charity that we really achieve salvation. And by the way, folks, every religion out there, from the Al-Quran to the Torah to the Bible, and again, every religion out there talks about charity, talks about being better, doing good to others. Correct? So that's the connection. That's the minimum denominator that we have from Christianity and other religions that nobody refutes. Nobody discusses that, because it's evidence that every religion talks about charity. And Allan Kardec was very enlightened when he made this comment, because that's the third liberation that you want to call out today. Charity is the vehicle, not how you call yourself, not how you identify yourself. That's just labels. When we go back to the spirit realm, they're not going to ask us, hey, Flavio, were you a spiritist? Were you a past giver? Were you a Catholic, a Protestant, an atheist? What were you? That doesn't matter. Those are only labels that we put on ourselves. Maybe it's through the definition that those are the labels, or those are the ideologies or teachings that we assimilate more, we like more, and that's okay. But those labels, they don't matter. What really matters, folks, is how much charity we do to others. How much are we really extending our hands whenever someone in need shows up at our doors? How much are we really spending or walking the extra mile, as Jesus asked us to, when somebody from our family or from our circle of friends is in need? How much are we going beyond sometimes our capabilities, our strength, to really help, to assist, to support somebody that may need our help? That's the ruler, folks. That's really the one that we're going to be measured against. How we call ourselves, how we identify ourselves, that's meaningless, as we learn from Spiritism. That's why this is the third liberation, or rather, the message that charity is the vehicle and not what we call ourselves. Correct? But if we look back into Jesus, and I'm going to ask you to pay attention to this picture. What do we see in this picture? What are some of the characteristics that we see in this picture? This is a drawing, by the way, that was produced about 50 years ago by a Spanish author. And what comes to mind here real quickly is that Jesus is talking to a lot of people from different ethnicities. He's rescuing people that were enslaved. He's talking to native Indians from different parts of the world, with children, with clerical folks from different religions, correct? That's Jesus talking to us, because his message is ambivalent. It's applicable and it's appropriate to everyone. But Flavio, does that mean that if I'm a Muslim, can I follow Jesus' message? Yeah, why not? Because it's a message of love. It's a message of care. If you look at how Spiritism really understands the message that Jesus shared, it's a message of love. That's the same message that was really distributed in the past. When we look at Jesus and all the charity that he practiced, all the assistance, anybody that was able to reach him, he was able to impose his hands, as we do passes in our Spiritist centers today. He was able to cure, to heal, to give that message of love, to give that message of welcoming, to give that positive news to somebody who was in need. He cured the sick, as I mentioned, right? He healed the afflicted. He spent a lot of time assisting those who are on the tangent, on the verge of society. He treated women with respect. He was the first character, or the first, call him important, person at his time that treated women with respect. Hang on, Flavio. Does that mean that Jesus 100%? But well, how come then only all the 12 disciples were men? You may ask that question if you're a woman. And this week we celebrated International Women's Day, because guess what? We still have to celebrate that, to show us, or to remind us, that the world is not an equal place between men and women. We know that, correct? Unfortunately, I should say. But when Jesus did that, he treated every woman with respect. The respect that was not seen in society back then. The true egalitarian treatment as we know it today. He really challenged this status quo. He always helped, he always cared and served. But hey, Flavio, you didn't answer my question. How come the 12 disciples were men? My own interpretation of this, my personal interpretation, is that society was not ready for a mixed disciples back then. But if you remember from history, when Jesus came back to tell humankind that he was alive, did he choose one of the 12 disciples to do so? No, he didn't. He chose the woman that made the biggest difference for humankind back then, Mary of Magdalene. Correct? So, folks, it's important for us to read the message, to read the gospel with eyes that liberate us, not eyes that put some more chains into what we're doing. The very same Jesus that Spiritism asks us to be used as a model and guide, somebody that really treats everybody with respect, that cares for people, that helps everyone, every person, the same exact way. Correct? And then the message that he left us, or he left for us to follow, yet a very simple message, but a very comprehensive one nevertheless. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And you should love your neighbor as yourself. So his message calls for us to really love ourselves, take care of ourselves, do what's best for us, but at the same time, love our neighbors. It doesn't say love yourself more than your neighbor. He said love yourself in the same exact way as we love others. Same exact way. But Flavio, hang on a second. Does that mean that if I have kids, if I have children, do I need to love my children the same exact way as I need to love everybody's children? That's the future. That's the destination. Are we there yet? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done for us to understand, comprehend that we're all siblings. Doesn't matter where we come from, what language we speak, the color of our skin, how we identify ourselves. Nothing matters like that. What matters is we see each other without differences, that we are all the same. As I mentioned in the beginning, first liberation, God is our creator. All of us are children of God. And if God is our father and mother, that means that you and I are siblings, or brothers and sisters and whatnot. Correct? So Jesus did not come to destroy the law, 100% not. But he came rather to fulfill it and to demonstrate using his own examples and words and wisdom in the form of parables, in the form of metaphors, so that we'll be able to understand back then, thanks to our knowledge, our limited knowledge rather, back then, and how much more we know today, thanks to science, the development of sciences, technologies, and whatnot. And then the parables are going to still be there because we're going to use them in comparison with our intelligence or knowledge and so forth. So when we see that, we can really understand that what he wrote, it's still very relevant for these days. 100%. Right? So, coming back to the role that women play in society, as I mentioned before, our society is very patriarchal, as we know. Man has some advantages that we shouldn't deserve. We don't deserve, honestly. Those are there because we still live in a patriarchal society, and that's sad, but we should all be working towards eliminating those biases, those privileges, as we know, right? But look at how interesting Leon Denis, the Frenchman who followed Kardec, who was really studious around Spiritism, a lot around its philosophy, around its moral consequences. And he made this phenomenal comment from the book that was written in 1905. Folks, look, well, let's read. The role of women in society is immense in life, rather. Sister, wife, mother. She's the great comforter and the loving counselor. For the son is his future, while she prepares the future human being. So let's stop here for a second, because roughly half of humankind today are men and half is women, correct? But our half that are not women, we came from a woman, correct? A woman had to agree to give birth for us to be here, correct? So we all in society owe women so much. But then Leon Denis doesn't stop there. If you look at the grammar here, he continues. And look at what he says. Therefore, societies that depress them, women, depress themselves. The respected woman, honored with enlightened understanding, is what makes the family strong and a great, morally inclined and united society. That's the pivotal role that women play in our society today. Flavio, but what about the family settings where we don't have a woman? For example, that role is played by one of the partners. The same way that, right, we learned that role has been played by a woman, but if you identify as a woman or if you played that role, that's the pivotal role that's there for us to really flourish as a society. So when we look at what Spiritism teaches us, when we understand that we're all the same, correct? That frees our minds from oppression. That frees our minds from sexism. That should free our minds from treating women without the respect, without the honor that they deserve. As a matter of fact, as a comparison purpose, in 1864, Allan Kardec, in the Spiritist Review or Spiritist magazine, he received a letter from one of these missionaries or one of these persons that was in South America on the Amazon jungle. Wasn't really, we had no idea what country he was there, but he was with his native Indian tribe in the Amazon. We can even imagine between Colombia, Venezuela, and Brazil right now. And then he was teaching, or he was telling the native Indians about Spirit's book. And look how interesting this letter that Kardec received in 1864. He received the letter that goes somewhere along the lines that this person was trying to teach the native Indians about Spiritism, about reincarnation, about all these teachings that we learned from Spiritism. And then the native Indian said, but hang on a second then. So does that mean that in the next life, I can come back as the white man? He goes, yep, 100%. We can come back as, for new native Indians, as white men back, and nothing like that. Yeah, everything is possible, as we know. So I may stop battling them, because if I keep battling them, there's a lot more deaths that are going to happen, and I may be calling my own people. Look how wise or how much wisdom the native Indian had when he talked to that person that was talking to them about reincarnation and things like that. So, folks, when we see this, when we comprehend this message, the essence of it, that in this life we have this composition, in another life we may come back with a different one. As a woman, we may come back as a trans person. We may come back as rich or as poor or with more. Yes, all these places, all these activities, they play a role for our own educational perspective, for us to learn new things, for us to learn new faculties, for us to learn new components, what really makes us all, which are immortal spirits. Correct? So let me take us into a journey in this very interesting book that Dante wrote called Divine Comedy, because it depicts the spiritual world, and it has also been demonstrated very eloquently by Andres Lewis collection, I should say, that we learned from Spiritism. And then the question that I have for all of us is, does hell really exist? What about life after death? We just mentioned about the person talking to the native Indian, right? What happens in the afterlife? All these questions that we have, or I should say, hundreds of people in all over the world, in the four corners of the world, really make that pilgrimage back to the spiritual world every single day. Correct? Our loved ones, as they get to the later age or sometimes early age, they come back to the spiritual world. What happens when we open our eyes and we're in a different place? Andrew Lewis, in his collection of 12 books, talk about that very, very in depth with a lot of details, that we should not forget that death is just a condition. That's not the end, folks. Death for us is just the unknown. And that's why a lot of folks still fear death, because they don't know what to expect moving forward. But when we look at this, right, I want to call out, maybe I want to make an invitation for us to, if we go on a trip, okay, let's say you go on a trip for many, many years. You're not going to come back to your house. What are some of the things you want to take with you in your baggage, on your luggage for that trip? But if you take too much luggage, is that going to help you, or is that going to hinder your ability to make a trip? Maybe you lose a connection, or right? So excess luggage sometimes, or oftentimes, make travel very difficult and painful. The Life in the Spiritual World collection by Andrew Lewis helps us, correct? It's 12 books plus the last one that comprehends the 13 books in total. This unforgettable, I should say, unforgettable characters, real life characters, that after repenting their mistakes, that after coming back to the consciousness, what did I do this? Or why did I let go of that baggage? Why did I bring that baggage? It's not going to help me. I brought all these dirty clothes that eventually I have to wash them anyways, right? When we look at this from a different angle, we understand death as just a long trip to the next destination. And then, thanks to Spiritism, we comprehend death in a different way. We should not fear death. We should talk about death as we're talking about a long trip that all of us are going to make. Oh, that's a phrase that Abraham Lincoln said. There are only two certainties in life, correct? Death and taxes. I joke about this because, yes, all of us are going to go through this, but very few of us have interesting conversations about death. And Spiritism helps us put into place the purpose of reincarnation or incarnation. Why we were born in this family. Why do we have children entrusted to us? What's our role as parents, as uncles, taking care of these children? All these questions are answered by this amazing collection from Andrew Lewis. Let's take a pivot here to a different place, because Paul, when he wrote this letter to the Corinthians, this is the second letter, by the way. I love this passage for several reasons. First, it's a great description of our lives, ain't it? Let's read that. We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. So this is a recognition that our lives, my friends, yes, they're gonna be failures. There will be shortcomings, correct? There will be difficulties. But at the same time, it's an assurance that God is always there for us. Let me highlight this. God is always there for us. What we can learn from Paul in this particular letter to the Corinthians is that there is no eternal punishment. And we're never abandoned by God. As a matter of fact, God is always by our side. And that, folks, is the sixth liberation, that God is a shepherd. He's really taking care of his, lambs, or his, folks who are us, all of us. That's why it's important to understand the concept that Spiritism brings of action and reaction, cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So the accountability that I mentioned here, and not any preferential treatment. We are not special. Once again, everything we do, we're accountable for. Everything we do, we have to correct that. But the beauty of God's providence, that God only gives us that correction exercise when we're ready. So God's not going to give a integral equation to a fifth grader in math, because that fifth grader will not know how to do an integral equation. Correct? We're not going to be asked to drive a semi 18-wheeler truck if we can only drive a pickup truck. So every opportunity that we have to redeem ourselves are going to present themselves at the right opportunity, the right moment, at the right time. That's why it's really important for us to pay attention to all of the choices that we have in front of us. Correct? The idea of fate as a product of where I was born, the color of my skin, my sex, my sexual orientation, my gender, my socioeconomic status, my disabilities or lack thereof. Those are conditions that we learn from Spiritism that help us achieve where we have to achieve. So the seventh liberation that I want to share with you guys here is, we're all destined to be happy. But in our own situations, in our own locations, in our own environments. And fate only applies when it's a byproduct of a previously made behavior or action. If I did this, now I'm able to repair. I'm presented with a situation that I can repair. But I'm still, most often than not, able to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not quite ready yet. Thank you very much. But maybe I need to postpone it. That's okay. We have free will. But if we keep procrastinating too much, then it's going to happen, regardless, right, of our will sometimes. So as we learned, from every action, there's a reaction. And we're ultimately responsible for what happens to our own lives. But hang on, Flavio. Does that mean that I'm responsible for my family or the family that I was born? Yes. Most often than not, we are the ones who have chosen our families. We are the ones who were chosen by our parents. That synchronicity had to happen for us to be in this place. That's why we learn from Spiritism that we are in the best place, with the best possible people around us, right? At the best time. Okay, but what about that family member? And this is, if we're in a physical setting, I would ask the question, raise your hand if there's nobody in your family who is a troublemaker. And usually nobody raises their hand. And then I go like something like along the lines, okay, if nobody's troublemaker in your family, maybe that person is you, right? Because our families, my friends, are the ones that are really, working together to repair. Yes, I acknowledge the fact that sometimes we have friends who are much closer than our family members. Isn't that so? You may have a friend that you met in high school or you met in life that is a much more close relationship than a sibling, correct? Yes, I acknowledge that. But what does Spiritism say about that? Very simple. The fact that there is a concept of real family or spiritual family that's not necessarily tied by bloodlines. That concept of real or universal family, or I should say spiritual family, are made by mutual sympathies and the communion of ideas that really keeps spirits together before, during, and after incarnations, right? And this brings our eighth liberation, which we learn from Spiritism, the purpose of our families. We are in a family setting to learn, to progress, to repair some wrongdoings from the past. That's the best place, the best time that we have to really evolve as immortal spirits that we are. Okay, Flavio, you said a lot. Maybe I lost one or two, liberation steps in the middle. Let's do a recap time now, okay? Let's really bring all of these liberations so we can really close this in that tone. So when we look, folks, from the first liberation, God is not a punisher. God is not a person. God created us all to be happy, right? God is a mother, a father, supreme intelligence of the universe. How do we get there? How do we get to happiness? How do we get to fulfillment? How do we get to evolution or to liberation? Charity is the vehicle, correct? But while we practice charity, we have to look around us and treat everybody with respect, with the same rights, with the same opportunities, with the same conditions. We get that, okay? We learned that death is not the end, that this is only one small chapter of our series of Netflix series of many, many chapters, correct? This is only one chapter. We also learned that God is a parent, not a judge. And let me make a parenthesis here. Sometimes a parent, if you have kids, you may, see that. Sometimes you see your kid bringing that little piece of metal and coming very close to a receptacle on the wall and inserting that metal on the receptacle. What do you do as a parent? Do you say, "Oh, my dear daughter, don't do that, because that's a current of 15 amperes, 120 volts. If the electricity, goes to your body, it may stop your heart, or it may do some that." You're not gonna say that, right? You're gonna say, "What are you telling me?" Just right. Sometimes we have to do that as parents. Sometimes we have to pull back or pull sideways or change the motion or the direction where we're going. And that's what God does to us. If we're not moving in the right direction for maybe a little while, He just steers us into the right direction. And the destination of all of us, our own destination, is really to be happy. How do we do that? We are helped. We have this support group that is based on our families, either blood tie families or our mutual sympathy families that we built along the way. So, my friends, there have been many, many liberation moments in human history. We've seen the Black liberation, women's liberation, gay rights liberation, Catholic theology of liberation are among the most recent ones. But I'll be daring enough to say that if liberation spirituality were universally implemented, there will be no need for any other kind of liberation, because all of our human problems and issues, they may not go away right away, but we'll have all the tools, all of the things that we need to push them down or to really overcome them and to remove all the darkness that sometimes are shedding light into our lives. And this liberation that I'm suggesting here, that Spiritism helps us, is not accomplished by opposing or battling or going to war with anybody. On the contrary, it happens automatically as the first objective of our strategic planning process is honored. Flavio, what does that mean? We folks, don't we plan our lives? We want to get married, we want to buy a house, we want to do this, we want to travel there. Why are we planning our lives spiritually? What are some of the things that I have to do to become a better person, a better spirit? And when that strategic planning process happens or is honored, we're able to create a clear and committed body of people around the globe who embody the presence of this divine being, who bring a profound teaching that will really transform the world. Let me repeat that. When we're able to join forces with this body, with this committee, or with this body of people, this group of people around the globe who are embodying the presence of the divine being around us, we'll be able to make a profound impact and teaching that's transforming the world. Luckily, we're seeing that already at some kind or some sort. People now, on average, are against wars, are against injustices, are against folks taking advantage of things that they don't deserve. Luckily, we're starting to see this move. We're starting to see this change. And the light at the end of the tunnel, the most important motivation that we should all have, once again, is Jesus, because he's our model and guide. And whoever desires, he said, to come after me, let him or her deny him or herself, take up his or her cross, and follow me. By this way, you will be known as my disciples, if you have loved one another. My friends, I truly hope this has been helpful to open some eyes and ears and thoughts and foster some dialogues on how can we really free ourselves from all these things, all these chains that brings us back to earth, but rather puts us up into this journey towards the future, towards a better future, more inclusive, more equal future for all of us. May Jesus and our guardian angels help enlighten our pathways now and never. Peter, back to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Flavio. That was a very inspirational presentation. I really liked how you tied it together at the end by emphasizing how individual and personal liberation can lead to the end of liberation, if you will. I believe we have some questions.
Let's go.
Okay, here we are. The first one. This is interesting. This is from Paula Craig. Did Jesus know Mary Magdalene at all during his life?
Yeah, we have recollections that, he talked to her. He gave us some counseling, some advice. Yeah, absolutely. And she was one that really followed his footsteps. I would say even more so than the 12 disciples. Mm-hmm. The only reason why she was not chosen, this is my personal opinion. You may disagree. We're going to still be friends. No problems, right? The only reason why he didn't choose her is because society wasn't ready for a woman as a disciple back then.
Okay. Next question. This is from Anna Rosa Soros. How do we find in ourselves the charity of Jesus to love those behaving in evil ways? How do we love the ones killing and torturing others, those we perceive, at least in this life, as innocent, like children?
That's a great question. Thank you, Anna. So let's start. Let's break that down. So how do we love those that we perceive in this incarnation as evil, right? Or as criminals? I'm going to invite you and everybody to take a look at our previous lives. Folks, if we lived in Jesus' era, we were not really giving him flowers. We were probably throwing stones at him, correct? So these behaviors, my invitation to all of us is, we've had those behaviors in our lives in the past, correct? And thankfully, some folks have helped us move away from that cycle of violence, the cycle of oppression, the cycle of crime activities and whatnot. So the way we love those folks is by finding a good, that everyone has a little good intention in their hearts. That's why when you go, for example, to penitentiaries, to jails, you see a lot of mothers there. That's the number one folks visiting, inmates, because their mothers still love them because they have something, right, good in their hearts. Yeah, they may have made some bad decisions in the past, some wrongdoings, right? And they'll have to overcome them in the future, sometimes even have to overcome them for the rest of their lives in this life. But what did Jesus call or invite to Simon Peter's house? He invited the scoundrels. He invited the prostitutes. He invited those that society said, you know what? I don't have anything to do with these folks. What does he do? He says, no, 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 no. Folks who are healthy, they don't need a doctor. These people, my friends, they need more help from us than anybody else. And that should be our behavior. And I think the last part of the question is, how do we treat others like children as innocent, right? If you remember when Jesus said, let the children come to me, what did he mean by that? He didn't mean by, hey, let the children who are illiterate, ignorant. No, he meant the simplicity, the humility that children usually have. So those behaviors are important for us to really see them, right, as priorities, as we know, because that's a precursor of our hearts being pure. And whenever our hearts being pure from the Beatitudes, we'll be able to see God. That's what Jesus promised us. But are children innocent? No, because as we learn from Spiritism, they are spirits like we are. Sometimes one of our children might be even much older, spiritually speaking, than we ourselves. So you have to understand that in the infancy states, it's really important for us parents, okay, to give them direction to their lives. That's in Spirit's book, question 314, if I'm not mistaken. We are really, really important. We play a huge role in helping them, steer them in the right direction, as we know.
Thank you. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Part of that question also is, I think, emphasizing the way in which if people punish those who are the most defenseless, it's hard not to be very upset with them and to seek retribution. Okay, next question. This is from Paul Jacoby. Hello, Paul. Is liberation only on an individual or family level, or does it also apply on a countrywide or worldwide level? When will we be ready for this?
Paul, receive my my hug, my friend. It's good to see you and heard from you. I honestly believe that the work that we have to do to liberate ourselves, it's an individual work, and nobody can do it for us. It's a conscientious activity that we embark on to really free ourselves from these situations that arise. But here's the catch, or here's the interesting piece. The more folks are together, that becomes a movement. Group, city, country, planet Earth, right? That's why I said the body of individuals all looking or thinking with that liberation mindset will really steer our planet in the right direction, right? That's my true belief.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. This is from Yasko Arakawa. Hi, Flavio. Great topic. People, countries in power, although using methods of 21st century, are still subjugating and enslaving or slandering others as before in times of Jesus. It seems to me that we failed to absorb all the great teachings of liberation, and we are far from exercising charity according to Jesus' standard. Or not.
Yasko, my greetings to you and all the folks from Baltimore. It's great to hear and see you here. Agreed. Yes. So, for example, now there are more slavery currently in the world than it had ever existed in the past. So, yes, there's still a lot of work to be done. I acknowledge that. I mean, data shows, evidence shows that still a lot of work to be done. Correct? We know that. That's evidence. However, on the flip side of that, there has never been so much volunteering work. People leaving their houses, their families, their loved ones to care and to help others right now than ever before. So while I see there's a lot of room to work here, I see on the other angle a lot of progress from a lot of individuals. Some of us may have missed the idea that Jesus left us, or this mindset, or this understanding that we're talking about here, right? I agree as well. But thanks to Spiritism, thanks to science nowadays, thanks to all the things that we're learning, we're really making strides to get there. So the world is progressing. It's there's no question about it, but there's still a long road ahead. A lot of work to be done as well. So it's both, I should say.
We have to have patience and a lot of faith. Absolutely. Next question. This is from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. In times of turmoil, such as current events in the Ukraine, it is very difficult not to be upset. How can we liberate ourselves from these feelings of anger and frustration?
That's a great question. So in terms of turmoil, what do? We rely on the author. So the book that we're reading right now, who is the author, folks? That's God, correct? And God is the supreme intelligence of the universe. He knows everything. God knows, I should say here, but God knows everything. He understands our most intrinsic motivation. Sometimes our motivations are not the best ones. Let's be honest, right? Sometimes our motivation are the war, conquering and battling and killing and all those things. But him, God understanding the way he is, he's in control. So nothing's going to happen that we should not go through. And everything that we go through, there's a huge teachable moment, a teachable opportunity for us to embark on. Flavio, but what about people in Ukraine that are having to vacate their country? Yes, we don't understand why that's happening to those folks in particular, but absolutely we should see and look at that with compassion. We should see and look at that, try to put ourselves in those people's shoes, help as much as we can, do what we can. At very least, we can say a prayer or two a night for those individuals who are going sometimes days without food and trying to really stay on other people's houses without knowing what the future is going to look like for them. Their lives are very difficult right now. But we still should trust the author who's got all of these under control. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be difficult? I believe so. But that's not the end, correct? The end, as we're going to progress towards, is a much happier, much more welcoming, much more encompassing end. And as Jesus mentioned himself, I did not come to give you the peace that the world gave you, but my own peace. When we understand, when we internalize that, we start looking into the situations with different eyes. Does that mean that we're not compassionate? Does that mean that we should be empathetic with what those folks are going through? 100%. Because guess what? They are our brothers and sisters who are suffering. And Jesus himself said as well, if you want to do it to me, do it to my loved ones that are in front of you who are in need. Every time we help somebody who are in need, we're really helping Jesus, really making ourselves, right, better disciples, better followers of Christ overall. So long answer, but the bottom line is, I personally fully trust that God is in control. He's in the joystick, moving, and if somebody is going close to going beyond the guardrail, he's gonna say, you know what? Hang on a second. Let me just take you out of this game right now because you're not behaving. Like a kid playing soccer or playing basketball starts to really fight. What does the referee does? What does the referee do? He just gives that player the record. Hey, sorry, you cannot play anymore. Just remove you for like 5 minutes, for example. Then you can come back play it again. So I know it's a simple analogy, but that's what I truly believe we should focus on and not let our mindset, our vibrations fall in this difficult moment. Again, empathetic, we should feel compassion, we should trust the providence and trust that we're moving towards the future, which is a much better one.
Thank you. I love that quote you shared with us, Flavio, from Paul. God has not abandoned us.
Never does. Never does.
Yes. Okay. Next question from the United States Spiritist Federation. What do you think is the most challenging quality of Jesus to emulate?
Oh, that's an answer for an hour. So I still believe it's love, because love is a very complex sentiment, correct? That we believe we understand what love is. But the way Jesus loved us all, we're far, far away from how we love others. The closest, the closest that we see that love is the love of a mother or somebody who plays the role of a mother to a child. It's a love that doesn't ask anything in return. So when we love our partners, we expect something in return. Maybe a kiss, maybe sex, maybe love, maybe dinners, whatever it is. Maybe cuddling, whatever it is that we expect in return, partnership and all that. We expect something in return. The way Jesus loved us, imagine how a mother loves a child that forgets about everything else just to take care of that child. When we practice that love to everybody, notice everybody, not only our family members, but everybody, that's the quality, that's the characteristic that Jesus taught us to love, that we are light years away from it, in my personal opinion.
Thank you. Let's see if we have another question. Yes. U.S. Spiritist Federation. In a lot of the Bible translations, you find the word love instead of charity. Can you expand on the concept of charity and if there is a difference?
Oh, great question. So, as we learn from Spiritism, charity, the definition of charity is a very interesting one. And the spirits tell Kardec that charity is actually three things. Okay? Charity is benevolence towards others, meaning you have to be good to everybody. Okay? You have to love everybody. You have to be good to everybody, practice goodwill to everybody. Charity is also the indulgence of people's wrongdoings or shortcomings or mistakes. When we look at so and so, yeah, I know he's not able to do that, but I'm going to be indulgent to his or her shortcomings. That's indulgence. Okay? And then the third one is the forgiveness of all offenses. That's the definition of charity. When we understand that definition, that puts us in a loving situation, because we cannot be benevolent if we don't love others. We cannot be indulgent if we don't love others. We cannot give something from us, donate something from us, love others, right? We cannot forgive if we don't love. Yes, some translations use the word love, but I honestly like charity better because it describes an action, not just a feeling. When you are charitable, it's an invitation for you to do something, to roll up your sleeves and get the work done. Go out there. If you want to visit those in the penitentiary, great, kudos to you. If you want to serve food for those who don't have anything to eat, great, thank you. If you want to say a prayer, if you want to call a family member who maybe, offended you in the past, if you want to forgive somebody, all these things are actionable items that we learn from Spiritism. And if we do all these things well, we move ourselves, we move our own knowledge close to the love that I mentioned before, the love that Christ loved us. Because if we just say the word love, I think it doesn't invite us to any activities, any actions. That's why charity, and by the way, in the Aramaic language, it's almost the same meaning, right? But as we define, as Spiritism gives us that paradigm of charity, it's a subtle difference that calls to action, as opposed to, yeah, I'm going to love, I'm going to do all the things that I have to do, but at the comfort of my leather chair. Yeah, you're loving, but you're not really working, right? You're not really transforming yourself. You're not really going the extra mile, walking the extra mile, as Jesus asked us to do. And folks, as I think Paul mentioned, or Paul asked a question here, that work, it's on us to do. It's not on anybody else. It's only on us to do, right? And we have to roll up the sleeves and get to work.
Thank you for that answer, Flavio. Let's see, do we have another one? Yes. The United States Spiritist Federation. What are some of the ways in which charity can liberate us from within?
I'm going to use a quote that Joanna de Angelis wrote in her book, one of her books, that there's no loneliness with solidarity. So the more we practice solidarity with others, the less lonely we become. And in this world of today that we are working a lot, we're doing all these things, and sometimes it's easy for us to feel lonely, right? Sometimes it's easy for us to say, oh, what am I going to do and all that. So Joanna calls let's be more solidar. Let's practice more solidarity with those who are in need. Let's, as I mentioned before, look for opportunities to be benevolent to others. Look for opportunities to maybe bring a positive message. Look for opportunities to really forgive those that have, offended us in the past. The more we do that, the more charity we do. And folks, I'm going to say something that might be revolutionary to you. Once we practice charity, yes, that person received something, but the person who received the most is ourselves. That's why charity is contagious. The more you do it, the more you want to do it, the better you feel about it. And the better you feel about it, the better lives we live. That's why it transforms us. Because when we look at, for the folks that are in very difficult situations, we start to really be more thankful for everything that we have. Doesn't have to be a mansion, a luxury. No, whatever we have, roof over our heads, we should be very thankful for. Because guess what? There are a lot of folks out there, our brothers, our sisters, who don't have a roof over their heads. The meal that we eat every day, a couple of meals a day. Some people don't have a couple of meals a day. So again, the more we practice charity, and again, I'm talking about material charity, but the more we pray, the more we connect with spirituality, all these things that we do, the beneficiaries are ourselves. And we can feel it, folks. It's transformative. We are a new person after we do that. And I invite you all to really delve into that movement of being charitable, of helping hands, of helping folks, of extend your hands for whoever's in need, for at the very least, right? Pray for those who are in difficult situations. The more we do that, the more we connect with spirituality, the more that happens, the more we feel at peace, the more we feel happiness, the more we feel fulfilled with our own lives. Does that mean that all of our problems are going to go away? No, they're still going to be there, but you're going to have more motivation, more energy, more drive to overcome your problems. Guarantee you that.
Thank you, Flavio. Nice answers. Okay, this will be our last question. This is from the United States Spiritist Federation. What is tolerance of, excuse me, why is tolerance of others important for liberation?
That's a great one. So if I understand the meaning or the concept of tolerance, which is this capacity to endure subjection or something, or for example, if I tolerate a behavior, right, of somebody that's, I think we have to separate this in two ways. We should not tolerate behaviors that are not good behaviors. In the same way that we don't tolerate our children to say bad things or to not behave when they're eating or when they're not. So I think tolerance is two aspects of you. Tolerance of bad behavior, we shouldn't tolerate. Okay? Point blank, we shouldn't tolerate. But what about a bad behavior or a difficulty that somebody has? For example, we have a very difficult relative that person is so shy that the person doesn't say thank you, that person doesn't call anybody. That's a situation, that's a difficulty that an individual has, or shortcoming, right? That individual has, that we have to tolerate, right? But tolerance here more so as an indulgence, in a way that person needs help. He's not there yet, correct? He's not there. He still has a shortcoming that I have to be indulgent. So that tolerance in the form of indulgence, it's also a form of charity. That's one thing that we should always practice. The tolerance that I mentioned before, the one that lets anybody do whatever they can to our lives, no. That shouldn't be our behaviors, right? We should respect people and should also ask or demand respect from others. Easier said than done. I fully subscribe to that. If you are in a situation of abuse, of difficulties, right? 100%. You may need some help. psychological help, fraternal counseling from a Spiritist center. Yes, a lot of help are there and available, but we need to separate tolerance, meaning bad behavior shouldn't ever be tolerated, correct? And a shortcoming, you see the individual doesn't know how to do any better, then your indulgence is going to help him or her get better at it. I hope that answered your question, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Flavio, both for the presentation and for your very thoughtful answers. And thank you, everyone who watched this live. And we thank all of you who have been following our weekly talks. Next Saturday, March 19th at 11 a.m., we will have Edward Christie, and the theme will be Blessed Are the Afflicted, Beethoven's Suffering. That'll be a great one. Edward is not only a wonderful speaker, but a very talented, classically trained musician. So this should be a subject close to his heart. Also, as a reminder, the United States Spiritist Federation has released a weekly virtual course called Initiation into Spiritism. This is live every Sunday at 10 a.m. East Coast time. But afterwards, you can always watch these courses whenever you wish. With extraordinary scope, this study will cover several relevant topics. It is based on the book Initiation into Spiritism, written by the renowned author Terezinha Oliveira, one of the major authorities in the field. Both beginners and those familiar with Spiritism will find this virtual course to be an excellent resource. Tomorrow's lesson, by the way, will be the 8th in the series, and it is called Miracle or Phenomenon. For more information, please visit the U.S. Spiritist Federation's website, www.spiritus.us/initiation-into-spiritism/. And now, before we end our live, I will do a prayer for us. So let us close our eyes. We thank you, dear God, for your presence of struggle to push in the direction of peace, both through our intentions and our thoughts, but also for our brothers in the world who are suffering as a result of struggle and violence. May we come together and do what we can to increase solidarity throughout the world. And may we each and every day do our best to focus on our inner liberation. We thank you, dear God, for all that you create, and we thank you, dear Jesus, for the ways in which you have inspired us. Amen.